How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. And today, I want to discuss Oprah Winfrey's trip to Pelican Bay State Prison. I would like for her to have been a little bit more objective because she's talking about a valuable tool that we use, which in some cases people call solitary confinement. I would disagree with that. I would call it rather restrictive housing or administrative segregation. It kind of embraces the evolution of where corrections is at, where we are right now, and that's the key. And Oprah, mad at you, Oprah, because you did not do an objective perspective of a practice that we on the front line need, that we on the front line utilize. It's a practice that helps ensure the safety and integrity of the facility that we work in. Safety and security, if you will. And you went and did a biased perspective based on the words of inmates and inmates advocates, and I did not once see a member of the front line discussing their perspective of why solitary confinement, again, I'd rather use administrative segregation or restrictive housing, why it works, why it's needed. So stand by. It's time to discuss it. Okay, guys, I had a chance to see the special that Oprah Winfrey did when she went to Pelican Bay. I saw it. And in my mind, it was not objective journalism. It wasn't. She moved in with a political agenda, which ultimately is going to be get rid of solitary confinement. Let's paint the inmates as victims. Let's not care about what they did to get into solitary confinement to begin with. And let's only get the perspective from either inmates or inmates advocates. That is not objective journalism. It's not. What would have been fair is, and I'm good with that, get the perspective from the inmates, get the perspective from the advocates, that's fine, but also get some perspective from the front line who utilize that tool. Because yes, guys, solitary confinement, and solitary confinement is such a primitive way to look at it. You know, corrections has evolved. We're not guards, we're officers. I know some people will say we're nothing but guards, but that's not the case. We're officers. If only you knew what we do behind the wall, but that's okay, because you're never going to know the truth. Because when you go in there with cameras, you don't see reality. It's when the cameras are off that you really see what's going on. But part of the evolution of corrections is the practices that we have committed to that have changed. And part of that is what you would call, or the public would call, solitary confinement. I'm going to go ahead and change that to restrictive housing or administrative segregation. Those are the terms that kind of embrace where we're at now, and I'll explain that. But when she went right off the bat and started talking about solitary confinement, that goes to show you that she's done no research. What she's doing is going on an extreme and then generalizing that stream across the board. But the problem here is that when we go to initiate change, the change is going to wind up getting us killed. You know, January 25th of 2017, Obama, he started by making sure that, hey, federal prisons, let's ban the use of solitary confinement for juveniles, which, by the way, are the most impulsive individuals that people can deal with. They're impulsive, and within that impulsivity, they're dangerous. Okay? But having said that, he made that effort to move forward, eliminate solitary confinement, or again, what you call solitary confinement based on a primitive notion, because I'm sure that's what he eliminated it on, based on what he believes it is, as opposed to talking the front line and understanding what it really is, and then go ahead and say, well, it can't be used for any juveniles. Well, if you look at Wisconsin, Lincoln Hill School, that's a prison for juveniles, they're getting assaulted left and right. There's injunctions by the ACLU that you can't use OC or pepper spray. You cannot use solitary confinement. So inmates don't feel that they can get punished. A teacher the other day was assaulted. A teacher. Assaulted. Her face destroyed. Inmates don't care. Because there's more laws going on right now that are benefiting the inmate population as opposed to staff, the people that want to risk their lives, that risk their lives for the public. Where's the laws that protect them? And now when we talk about these changes, especially towards what you call solitary confinement, again, I'm going to say restrictive housing or ag seg, these changes are based on something primitive. But it's okay, because what happens is politicians are going to wind up putting their names on something, saying that they initiated this change, not realizing that, no, brother, no, sister, the change has already been in play. It's like PREA. You know, PREA comes in and everybody thinks, oh my God, it's about time these correctional departments start having zero tolerance for sexual assault. We always had zero tolerance. PREA was actually initiated to encourage people to speak up. But the problem is the people that push these federal acts make it look like we haven't done anything. That's not the case. Same thing here with Again, I'm going to say solitary confinement, but I would prefer restrictive housing or ag-seg. I'm saying solitary confinement because not a lot of people recognize the other terms. Now, with that in mind, why is solitary confinement needed? Ask anybody from the front line, which Oprah did not do. She kept her reporting to inmate advocates and inmates, and that's not objective at all. It's not objective. If you went to the front line is going to tell you why it's needed. The front line will tell you that sometimes our environment, inmates can pose a threat. And I'm sure most of my audience would agree with that. So in the process, when an inmate poses a threat, what are you supposed to do with that inmate? You can't keep them in population because you have other inmates. You have the security of the facility you have to watch out for. You got to keep those other inmates safe. You got to keep staff safe. And don't forget, while you're focusing on that one inmate, we got to focus on the rehabilitation of the many. And you get these movements on the streets with bullying, right? Anti-bullying. Let's stop bullying. Let's do this. Let's stop bullying. Well, you stop bullying because why? Because bullies pose a threat to the students. Students can't concentrate if they feel bullied. So people make an effort to do what they can to get the bully out of that area so the teacher can then focus on whatever needs to be focused on and the children can take it in. Same thing here. We got a bunch of inmates looking to rehabilitate. If an inmate poses a threat, it can stop the inmates from learning. It can stop the inmates from taking that in. So you must take that inmate and put him into another area. You're removing that inmate from general population and you're putting him in another secured area so they can be attended to. But here's the thing, guys. Here's part of the evolution of what you call solitary confinement. Again, I'm going to stick to the term restrictive housing or ag-seg. Part of the evolution is that they're not forgotten. Their needs are met. They get programs, mental health services, educational services, whatever needs to be done with those individuals, it gets done. Even more so aggressively, it gets done. Therefore, they are not forgotten. If there are any signs that they're starting to decompensate mentally, then they go to a special housing, like a treatment part within the facility. But their needs are being constantly met. Don't let people tell you, especially those that we'd expect a little objectivity from, like Oprah. Listen, you may respect her, but she doesn't know how the system works. She did not take any interview from the frontline perspective. Remove political figures. The secretary, remove him. Go from those that work the front line who are affected by the changes you're trying to implement. Which is, instead of helping approve a needed tool, because staff would tell you that it's a needed tool, you look to eliminate it. If you think about it too, I mean, I'm not one to do a lot of research here, but I do know for a fact that people are more motivated by a loss than they are a gain. And restrictive housing is just pretty much that. Inmate acts foolish, what do? You take away everything from them, except for their needs. That means they still get their showers, they still get their food, medical, mental, whatever. You just take away the luxuries. You ever have a child that gets in trouble and you take away their TV or their video games? No different. Now, if you want to get those stuff back, you have to earn it. You have to earn it. But if you take away those tools and the privileges become rights, how can staff maintain control when inmates have nothing to lose? How can staff get inmates who don't want to do what needs to get done to follow those orders? What gives staff leverage is the ability to take away things if needed. And they're not their needs. The needs are met. They're luxury items. They're what we call, again, privileges. But if you start making those privileges rights, staff has nothing to utilize to maintain control. And solitary, again, I would say restrictive housing. Now, look what I just mentioned. Taking away stuff. That's why it's called restrictive housing. Or ag-seg, just separating. But again, you're given the chance for the inmate to prove themselves. Because once they lose something, it's going to get to them. And I know some people say, well, lifers have nothing to lose. Yes, they do. They have a lifestyle that they've been accustomed to, that custody can act on, if need be. It's what helps give custody control. But again, we got to push laws that help custody do their job. Because right now, the laws that are being passed, the inmates feel entitled. Again, in Wisconsin, the teacher gets attacked. What can we do with the inmate? What can we do with the juvenile? Laws are being passed that aren't protecting her. They're protecting the inmate. And now the problem here is that staff, they don't know what to do because nobody's asking them. If you sat down with staff and try to understand their perspective, it would tell you why these things are needed instead of going to the extreme left on things. This is middle ground. And I guarantee you the reason why these things are done, they're done for the safety of the facility, not just staff. Because you're going to have inmates that are going to come up to you and say, hey, thank God you took that inmate somewhere else because I'm trying to rehabilitate here. And this inmate's a constant problem. He's a constant problem. So thank you for doing what you need to do to make sure that I can focus. Because at the end of the day, a lot of us want to get out. A lot of us want to do the right thing. But we can't rehabilitate if we have this inmate in here acting up all the time because we're not able to move forward. And I can't focus if there's a threat in the environment. And also, Oprah mentioned something, too, that kind of got me upset. It's kind of like universal precaution. And us in law enforcement, yes, I consider corrections law enforcement, we act on universal precaution, which means that we look to prevent. Prevent. We cannot always react. Because if we react, someone's going to get hurt or worse off killed. So let's just talk about an inmate that's a gang member. And I know in California, there was an effort to say, you know what, inmates that are gang members, they should be placed in what they call a security housing unit, the SHU, if you will. And the reason why that was done is because when inmates are behind the wall, they still commit to illegal activities. They can still, it sucks, but you got contraband that comes into the facility, whether it's through visits or whether it's through some of us, unfortunately. But they can still make phone calls. They can still order hits. They can still get contraband into the facility. Sex trade. All these things can still be done. So sometimes if we feel that an inmate poses a threat, and by the way, when I say pose a threat, we're giving them warnings after warnings, but the inmate just chooses not to listen, then we have to be preventive. And being preventive is what I would call, you know what? He doesn't want to listen. She doesn't want to listen. Then we got to do what we got to do. Because at the end of the day, our number one priority is protecting the facility and the public. That's our number one priority. And when I mean facility, I mean inmates and staff, volunteers, anybody that enters that facility. Tours. So we got to do what we got to do. And our work does reflect onto the public, trust me. The work that happens behind the wall, it makes its way out in the public. You guys just don't know about it because it's in shadows of justice. But it happens. I also want to talk, I know sometimes people think that rehabilitation and punishment, they work in isolation of each other. And that's going to be an argument we have for another day. But I'm going to disagree with that. Because I think part of rehabilitation is understanding the consequences of your actions. I believe that wholeheartedly. I believe that part of rehabilitation is understanding the consequences of your actions. Why are we so willing to believe that they work in isolation of each other? Why don't we know that there's a balance? You know, back in the day it was strictly punishment, correct? And then rehabilitation came in. It's forget about punishment, strictly rehabilitation. Well, I'm going to tell you it's a balance of both. It's a balance of rehabilitation and punishment. Because not everyone wants to be rehabilitated. For rehabilitation to work, they have to embrace it. You can't force someone to change. And for those who don't want to change, well, guess what? This is the other avenue. This is the avenue that we have to take. And it's an immediate action. It's immediate action because at that moment in time, we got to worry about the secured running and the safety of that facility. But with that in mind, I also want the public to know, even though that rehabilitation and punishment don't work isolated from each other, rehabilitation will never trump safety and security. Because it's a safe and secured facility that makes rehabilitation conducive to that environment. Without safety and security, we ain't rehabilitating nobody. So in essence, custody, the people that put their lives on the line to make sure that the facility is safe and secured, they're like the canvas that this picture is painted on. Without the canvas, you have no work of art. Which means that for those like Oprah, who's going to do a show and claim her show's objective, you should be talking to custody. Asking frontline staff, what's the concerns here? How can we help you make it better? What can we do? Don't think that you can come into our world and initiate change without talking to us. Because the change that you're going to initiate is going to get people killed. It's going to get people killed. And look at the timing on this. Let's go back to February. Lieutenant Floyd killed in a riot in Delaware. Inmates took over a unit, killed him. Megan Callahan in North Carolina, what happened to her? She goes in to put a fire out because there's a fire on a dorm, and she gets beaten to death by the extinguisher that she was going to use to put the fire out. She even got scalded with hot water. And then just recently again, that was in April, now we're looking at, October, we had another riot. This time it was in North Carolina. As of me doing this, killed 2 people, Justin Smith and Veronica Darden. These are inmates that are taking control of the facility and killing our frontline staff, the people that are protecting us. So Oprah, ill timing with the changes that you want to implement. Very ill timing. We got custody people. We got civilians getting killed within our correctional system, and you want to work laws out or push an agenda that puts their life further at risk. How I would like to see you do a special that talks to frontline staff so they can explain to you firsthand of why these practices are needed. And again, just the timing. The timing. We're getting killed left and right. And you're going to push a political agenda that is not even balanced. It's more about the safety of the inmate than it is about the staff. And don't you understand that it's staff that we should start with? Because it's staff that's going to make it safe for everyone. And it's staff that we owe a debt to. Because they're the ones risking their lives every day. They're the ones out behind that wall. In the shadows of justice. Dealing with the worst of the worst people that don't want to be there. And we're not helping them. A better episode could have talked about understaffed facilities on a national level. Because again, understaffed facilities also affect the inmate population. But these are things that we can help. Help staff. It indirectly gets to the inmate population. But we're not doing that. We're not creating the balance needed. The system is bleeding from the inside out, and we're doing these push for these political agendas that only help out one side and weaken the other. You cannot create a safe and secure facility by only focusing on one side. It's unbalanced. And that change is not going to help the facility at all. When I say the facility, anybody that resides within that facility. You're not going to help them. And your push to eliminate tools without understanding why those tools are in play, that's going to further not just the divide, but further the vulnerability of the people that put their lives on the line to protect us behind the wall. Because again, the work that they do behind the wall will find its way on the streets. It will. Right now there's no room for middle ground. People don't want to touch middle ground. They either want to go left or right. And that's sad. Because at the end of the day, it's the road of compromise, which means you talk to both sides and see what's going on. Corrections, again, has evolved. You're pushing on an agenda that really is irrelevant to today. And the sad thing is, the people that are jumping on this political agenda, they're starting to say things like, yeah, we got to see more programs, we got to see all this. It's being done. We can improve. We're not perfect. But you're not looking to improve. You're looking to eliminate. And that's why we get frustrated. Because we know eliminating is not going to help. It's not. It's not going to help us. It's going to put our lives at risk. And all we're asking at the end of the day is give us a chance to speak. Give us a chance to provide that other side of the conversation that you seem so willing to negate or minimize. I mean, do some research, Oprah. Do some research. Listen to our concerns. But be objective. Be objective. That's all we're asking. This was not objective journalism. Now, there are some that will say the elimination of solitary confinement has lessened the violence in prisons. At least that's what's been documented. Well, let me tell you something. Lately, with political pool, people are more concerned about tomorrow than they are actually worried about today in the moment. Like, again, I worry about my frontline staff. I'm not worried about office that I'm going to run tomorrow. You know, I got to care about what's going on in the moment. And what people have been saying right now is that there's been studies showing that less solitary confinement leads to a less violent prison. And I would love to see those numbers, because I know for a fact departments like to downplay. They like to downplay fights to an unauthorized contact, downplay riots to disturbances. So at the end of the day, the numbers that you're showing or that you're trying to show, maybe it's just numbers that confirm what we call confirmation bias. They confirm what you want it to be and not reality. Because at the end of the day, you ask frontline, and they're the ones that are living it and breathing it immediate to your areas that you want to change, they're going to tell you those numbers are not accurate. They're not accurate. And at the end of the day, our people document what they should be documenting. If I'm living in solitary confinement, I have a motivation to make sure it looks like it's going to work. Therefore, fight, unauthorized contact. Make that unauthorized contact. Right? Because it goes across my political agenda. That was a riot? No. Don't make it a riot. It's a disturbance. Make it a disturbance. Because again, I'm involved in that political agenda. I'm involved in that. So therefore, the information I may push may only help what I'm already involved in. Because I have to make it work. And sometimes that may involve me downplaying what's really going on. That's why you need to ask staff. Because staff is going to tell you the truth. Staff is going to tell you, that wasn't an unauthorized contact. That person punched me. Or that wasn't a disturbance. They tore down the facility. There was fires. 120 inmates didn't want to lock in. How was that a disturbance? That's a riot. So again, this is just a quick dialogue I wanted to have. I just wanted to make sure that people know that there's two sides to every story, and Oprah Winfrey only spent her time on one side. Yes, Oprah, on one side. And you said it right at the beginning. You talked to inmate advocates and inmates. And then you talked to a political figure who said, actually, it's crazy. He said it was a mistake to have solitary confinement, and then you go back and tell the inmates it wasn't a mistake. That's great, because I feel sorry for staff now. I feel sorry for staff now that need to enforce something, but may not have the consequence to do that. Great job. But at the end of the day, this was not objective journalism, Oprah. It wasn't. What it was is a political agenda that you were trying to push, and you went to the people who can help push it. What would have been fair is if you would have went back to front line and asked them, hey, listen, we're doing something on solitary confinement, but again, educate me. What is solitary confinement? Oh, you call it restrictive housing. Oh, I'm sorry, administrative segregation. Oh, I see why, because you're saying some of the practices have changed. I understand that. And guys, remember, guys, we have to embrace those changes. Because if we don't embrace those needed changes, we're not going to have tools like solitary confinement. They're going to take those tools away. So we need to show the humane side of what we do. And that's the balance of the argument. But at the end of the day, we have to express why it's needed and why it's humanely done. Because then if we do it that way, you can't argue it. Oprah would have no segment. Everything she challenged us against was literally lies. Practices that we've already committed to that she's trying to say don't exist. I disagree with her. But at the end of the day, this is our argument. This is our fight. This is what we got to do. So Oprah, it wasn't objective journalism. You did not present both sides. I suggest that you have your little CBS, little 60-minute segments going on. Go back, talk to Frontline, and give us the other half of the report. Because that 10 minutes that you gave us, it was one-sided. Give us the other side now.
show respect to the people that risk their lives every day behind that wall. And let's start helping them so they can help the inmates, because that's how this world works. Love you guys. Stay safe. The show is Tear Talk. And again, cage is closed, and see you on the other side.